All right, we are live here on the SHEconomy Show. I have been a little absent the last few weeks. I've been down in Mexico with some internet issues, and so unfortunately haven't been able to come live. But here we are today, and I'm so excited because we have Coralie Zueff on with us today, and she is a master service advisor and coach. But it doesn't stop there. She is a service manager, an entrepreneur, and a multiple time number one best-selling author of Five-Star Service Advisor. So Coralie, welcome. I have been so excited for this show. We've had it booked for a while now. Why don't you tell everybody about you and what you do and really what path you're paving for all these fabulous ladies?
Thank you very much for having me on, Katie. That's an awesome introduction. Thank you very much. I guess I am that busy when I think about it, wearing all those different hats on my head. So currently I'm not a service manager. However, I am a parts and warehousing instructor as well at North Island College. So that's another hat that I'm wearing. And actually, after your book came out, Custom Her Experience, it got me thinking about how I do things, because I didn't think it was really unique to my gender of how I explain services to people. But after yours came, I'm like, oh, okay, I guess it is then.
It is. It is definitely different when you look at the different genders. Let's talk about the Five-Star Service Advisor. I mean, I come from the customer experience world. I've got 20 plus years in the customer experience realm, and I've worked in every industry you could imagine, including automotive. But I've never looked, really closely at the service lane. And so I'm really excited to hear about your book. How do you unpack a five-star service, and how do you get folks, through your coaching and your training to deliver on that?
I'm very grateful. I kind of found service advising. It was like the third thing that I tried in automotive. When I was in high school, I didn't know what I wanted to be when I grew up. I was thinking about lawyer, but then one day I was leaving the school and I saw like a poster on our door, and it was for the automotive foundations course, and something clicked right there. I was like, I should do that, because even if I don't end up being a technician, it's still a huge, valuable amount of information that I can gain and use, as I am a car enthusiast. So I did that and it was super awesome, but I miss talking to people. You can't get so many words out a day when you're around a vehicle. So after I finished the foundations course, I'm like, well, I know about automotive. I'll jump right in and be a car salesperson. So I took the course to do that, and I jumped in with selling cars, and it was fun. And I had some great mentors, and I found a really awesome dealership that I was at for some years. But customers didn't want to talk about when they're purchasing a car, lifting the hood and seeing how easily accessible things were. This is where you top up your washer fluid. This is how you check your coolant. There's your dipstick. Isn't it all fabulous? It's not covered in plastic or anything. So after that, when I missed talking about, parts and service as opposed to the features on a vehicle, I took a job as a parts person at a chain that we have here in Canada. And I really thrived in there. That was my sweet spot. People would bring a random part in, plunk it on my desk, and want me to find it for them. And when I could identify what it is, because they didn't know the name of it, and then I could find a brand new one for them and, prove myself that I knew what I was talking about. That was super awesome. That gave me, warm, fuzzy feeling inside. And then at that time, the service manager, I guess, realized that I was thriving in that department and brought me over to service.
Awesome. So that's where you started in service. And so what got you to writing this book? And unfortunately, in the automotive space, there's not a lot of five-star anything, right? The experience, whether it's in a dealership or with an aftermarket or in the service lane, five-star doesn't really exist. So how did you stumble upon creating this idea and then cultivating words around it to be able to explain what a five-star service advisor is. And what is a five-star service advisor? Maybe we should start there. Like, what is your definition of a five-star service advisor?
It was actually because you can have 5-star anything, right? So it was actually my publisher, or I was doing a course with her, Suzanne, who came up with the title for me. I couldn't come up with one. She's like, "How about this?" I was like, "Okay, that's it."
Uh,
And so it kind of stuck.
Nice. Very nice. So
Mhm.
let's talk about the book. Let's talk about what it's about and, and everybody that's listening and watching the replay in the comments, I have put Coralie's link to her book, Five-Star Service Advisor, in the comments. What is the book about? What if they're clicking on that link right now and they're going to, say, yeah, I should buy it. Why should they buy it? What is it about?
So that's actually after being a service advisor and manager for years.
Mhm.
I'd come up with a good process to have happy customers. In a job interview, they would ask, "Well, what do you do with upset customers?" And I'd be like, "Upset? What are they upset about? Like price, time, not meeting their expectations?" And I was like, "Oh, I don't encounter that too often. Sorry, but it doesn't usually happen. And if they're upset, it's because I've messed something up in my communication of talking to them. So it would be my fault then." So during COVID, when we were all kind of stuck at home and had nothing to do for a short while, I was like, "Okay, I've had this on the back burner for quite some time. Now is the time I'm going to get this done." So it was my COVID project. So I'll walk through, like at the introduction, we talk about how service advising isn't something that generally people set out from high school to do. It's not
Mhm.
usually a career option for them, and how they accidentally fall into it. And we'll go from booking the appointments all the way to finishing the repairs and beyond in case there's any issues, as well as some automotive tidbit knowledge in the back there. So it really covers all aspect of service advising.
That's fantastic. So really anybody who is in that service lane uh, can benefit from it, but anybody who is a service advisor and a leader, so a service manager, should definitely be reading it.
Yeah, I've had people say it's like awesome for beginners. I've had some feedback just earlier this week saying, even if you've been in the industry for, I think this person was like over 17 years, there's still, little tidbits and things that can be refined
Yep.
in it. So
Well,
there's always room for improvement.
that's awesome. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about. So you've written this book, and you're not a service manager currently, but you are teaching, which is fantastic. Which means all the principles that are in this book, folks can come to you and learn it from you. So let's talk a little bit about those services that you provide, and experiences where people can learn to be a five-star service advisor.
Yeah, it's one thing to read a book, but there's always little stories and tidbits that can go along with it, as well as some areas might need more help, or tailoring different processes to a certain shop as well, so we can do that. I haven't done any in-person training yet because we began during COVID, so I've just been meeting people and folks on Zoom, but excited to get out and visit people in person.
Fantastic. Okay, so let's talk about, if you were to give advice, and I know as a lady and a woman that you've come up through the ranks and you've paved a path. That must have been, I don't know, maybe your experience wasn't difficult, and I'm totally making an ass of myself because I'm assuming that it was difficult. But what was that journey like for you as a woman? Because in the industry, there's very few of us. And so what was that journey like for you?
I feel like the most challenging spot for me was the interview process. Um, to like come face to face with somebody and to share like how you can do things and what you're all about in an interview, that when you get there you're kind of getting judged. I've been passed up for jobs by men countless times,
Mhm.
and that's sort of the one thing that I think I um somehow I don't shine through in that process. So that would be the one spot I think would be the challenging one.
So how did you overcome that? Because
I think
that's probably, you're not the only one, right? And so this is an amazing little piece of information. You were able to overcome it. How did you overcome being passed up for jobs because you're a lady?
I think that if I'm getting passed up for work because I'm a lady, then I probably wouldn't be a good fit there anyways. They're not ready to accept a woman into their space. So it's
Mhm.
probably a blessing in disguise as opposed to getting the job and then finding out that it's not a good fit later on.
Well, I totally agree with you, but that does something to, I mean, man or woman, when you're being passed up for a job, I mean, or you'd get the no, you've wanted something and it doesn't happen. So really with anything in life, but as a woman that, faces these obstacles far greater and more frequently than a man, um, what advice would you give to women out there that are getting those no's and are still attempting those interviews? But I mean, those negative self-talk, I mean, it happens, right? We can't help it. So what advice would you give them, so that they can keep, forging forward?
Good question. I because it's hard. You get that thing in your little voice in the back of your head and your brain saying, "Oh, okay, well maybe you should just give up, or maybe you're not good enough,
Mm.
or maybe you should do something else or something like that." However, if you have a goal like a path in your career that you want to move on, there's usually little like road signs that you can notice that will tell you that you are on the right path. So I've been very fortunate that when I feel discouraged and I look at the path that I'm on, that something will pop up, like unexpectedly there'll be a comment online or a text from somebody, just checking in or saying that I've done a good job on something. There's always those little reminders. So it's very important to listen to those. I think it's important for us to remind each other too, to keep tabs and be encouraging as well.
For sure. Persistence is super important. Do you know the author, and he's an amazing keynote speaker, Ed Milet? Have you heard of him?
I
Power of
don't
One More.
think off the top of my head.
No, okay. Well, if you got everybody listening, if you don't know who Ed Milet is, you have to check him out. He's got an incredible podcast. I mean, multiple number one best-selling New York Times bestseller selling books. The Power of One More, I have read. Um, I've read it 4 times and listened to it like 3 times. He's incredible. But the reason I bring him up is I was listening to one of his podcasts, and he's talking about entrepreneurship and how, if you're on the road and there's 2 paths you can take. You can take the seamless path that's, basically you're a sheep, right? You've got your nose stuck up someone else's rear end, or I like to say the corporate ladder, that the only time you actually get ahead of the person and above you is if that person falls off and retires or takes a step sideways. But he says, and he makes this visual of a sort of bumpy dirt road with abandoned cars and broken signs and just debris everywhere. And it's all those little signs of even heartache or no's that tells you almost you're on the right path. And to listen to that, because as anybody, whether you're an entrepreneur or a woman in a male dominated space, or maybe a man in a female dominated space, you're walking a path that many tried to walk, but they abandoned ship, abandoned their cars, the signs down, and they decided to go, join the herd with the sheep. And so that visual sticks in my head because the no's are sometimes incredible, because the other people have heard those no's and given up, which means you have one more try, you have one more opportunity to get, a step ahead. And so I think it's important that you listen to those no's, but they don't detour you, and then you listen to those positive vibes like you're saying, and you're open to keep being persistent. I love that. It's incredible advice. We have Michelle McLean on, who is an amazing friend of mine, and really everybody in the industry. She's saying Ed Milet is fantastic and amazing, and persistent absolutely pays off. It really does. I call those God winks. It's so important. Okay, so you have had trouble with interviewing, and you've gotten past that. Have you had any other obstacles that you've overcome that you can share some more golden nuggets with everyone listening?
I guess not so much an obstacle, but being a female, another thing that we encounter is when we choose to have a family, if we choose to have a family, then you have to step out of the game for some years. Or, it can be a short time, but you still have to step out of the game. So I remember when we had my first daughter, and then I quit working and we moved to a different town, and I wasn't known in the industry there anymore. And then I decided to stay home with her, and we had our second daughter. So during that time is when I actually got my parts, because parts in warehousing is a journeyman ticket here in Canada, same as technicians or automotive technicians. It's a red seal card. So I spent my time doing that, building skills in the industry, but it's not the same thing as working and having that experience as well. So while I did try to stay in the industry as much as I could, I still had that blank spot in my resume as well when it was time to go back to work. So I think that is a challenge that's fairly unique to females who decide to have a family, and if it makes an impact or not, or when you decide to have kids as well. Whereas I don't think the men have to decide, okay, well, how is having children going to impact my career, climbing the ladder, or getting to my next goal? So it's like we have to take a time out.
Yeah. So, okay. So we talk about with every challenge, there's an opportunity to overcome. So you had this gap and you went through this. How did you bridge that gap? And you came back, trails ablazing, because as I said, you've written a book. You've started your own business. You're not only written a book, but you're a best-selling author, an amazing, amazing role model for your daughters. But how did you bridge that gap?
Like I say, I think that's when I was like sitting at home and trying to research how to move ahead in my career when I was at home. So that's actually when I found the parts in warehousing. I was like, oh, and nobody had brought it to my attention before that it was a certificate that I could achieve. So while I did have a blank work experience thing on there, I did have some education that I could put on there to kind of fill that gap.
So always learning. I mean, isn't that, I just recorded a whole bunch of tips that are going to come out. And I say it on there, if we stop learning, we might as well be dead. And that's not my quote. I mean, it's something everyone uses. I don't know who the original quote owner is, but it's true. At least you found an opportunity to learn and you kept going. So that's back to that persistence. You decided to do one more thing to advance your career. And that goes back to this. I mean, Ed Milet's amazing, but it's that one more time. You've taken one more step, and you haven't let anybody detour you, any of those no's detour you, and it's super commendable.
Yeah, I was thinking about that path you mentioned that people are traveling on, and then you see the abandoned car. I'd be like, what kind of abandoned car is it? Is it cool? Should I tow it home?
That's awesome.
Just from being in the automotive space, right? It's like, not only do I work in automotive, I have automotive hobbies. Like I had a technician introduce me to autocross. So hopefully once a month I take my own car to the track, and it's like a cone obstacle course. So everybody drives through as quickly as they can without hitting cones. So not only do I work in automotive, I play in automotive too.
That's awesome. So you were an automotive gal through and through. Fantastic. All right. Well, let's give the listeners and the viewers one more solid piece of advice. If there is one thing that you wished you had known starting out in a highly male-dominated space, what would that have been?
I'd say, like I just went over with the parts and warehousing students a couple weeks ago, is to first come up with your 3 values that are important to you, and having those in the workspace and knowing what they are. And then when you're going out and looking for a job, to make sure you find a team that really meets those values. I've been fortunate that most of the teams that I've worked with, They've had my back and I've had their back, and we have the same values, and it's awesome. Like when I started out in automotive sales at 19, I had one of the sales guys, his name was Henry, and he pulled me aside. He's like, he warned me about, he's like, okay, do you see over there the general manager? It's like, okay. And do you see the business manager? It's like, okay, she used to be a salesperson just like you, and now she is in there and they're dating. And he didn't say anything else. He had just sort of warned me about that. So I find getting a team that has your back is the most important thing, because I've been in places before. I was like, oh no, this is not for me. we can't work together. So knowing those values and making sure you have a team that will help you keep those values and has the same as you.
All right, everybody's heard it here. You need to have those values and make sure that you surround yourself with the people that have the same or very similar values that complement you. It's extremely important. Michelle is saying, Katie and I were just having this conversation last week. The struggle, it's real. It is so, so real. And having people that are great surrounding you with the same values is definitely a way to overcome it. All right, let's let everybody know, Coralie, how do they get a hold of you? I've put your book link on the comment section, but how do they get a hold of you, and where can they find you on social media if they want to have a one-on-one coaching, or if they want to bring you into their shop? How do they do that?
So you can visit my website, that is coraliezuef.com, my name.com. And then for social media, I spend most of my time on LinkedIn. So on my website, there's a form that you can fill out and it'll come right to me, and I have a calendar. You can schedule a time. If you're on LinkedIn, you can send me a direct message or comment on one of the posts that I have there, and we'll connect.
Okay, well, fantastic. I hope that all of you, if you are in the service industry and you need to level up, because let's be real, there's so many shops out there, period. They're a stone throw away. And if you need to level up your service, you need Coralie. So let's make sure that you elevate your experience, because that's the only differentiator, is your team and the experience you provide. And Coralie is the woman to help you out with that. Thank you so much, Coralie, for joining me today and on the SHEconomy Show. And really, even more, I'm so grateful the fact that you are blazing a path for the future ladies of the industry. So thank you so much for being you, and keep spreading your awesomeness around the industry.
Thank you very much, Katie. Back at ya.
Awesome. All right. Goodbye, everyone. Ciao.
Good night.